Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And welcome back to Going in Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about shocking releases in wrestling history. Before we get started with that, I did want to bring this up very, very quickly. We had a super chat yesterday on our show, which I neglected here at the end to read the thing. And so I wanted to read this now, and I was going to read it now, but then it disappeared.
Oh, no.
So I guess we'll just get going with the shocking releases, Larson. What was the impetus for this episode, Larson?
Well, you know, unfortunately, we had a series of releases late last weekend. And it just got me thinking about releases that were, I mean, it's usually surprising when people get released, but in instances where releases were just like really surprising, shocking, even to the extent at which they were surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
that's kind of it.
That's a good impetus. I was hoping to use your explanation to give me time to find that super chat.
That's the best I got for you.
And I know there's such an easy way to do it on here, but there's like 5 different possibilities on how to do it, and I'm stuck figuring it out. So we're just going to go ahead and dive into it at some point. In this episode, you're going to find out more about this elusive super chat, but first up, let's start off with number 10. Cody Rhodes, back in 2016.
In 2016, May 21st, 2016, he put that picture on Twitter of his list of all the things he wanted to do.
Always has to be. Why does he always got to be dramatic about things? You got to put a whole list.
That is the Cody way.
It is the Cody way.
It is the Cody way. So he's talked extensively about why he asked for his release. A lot of creative frustration. I got this quote here. This is the interview he did in 2019 with what he told Triple H, or the conversation he had with Triple H about why he wanted to leave. He said, Hunter took it very personally because he had done so much for my dad at NXT. There was one conversation where he said, I'm shocked you feel this way after everything I've done for your family. But I told him, I'm not my dad. I can't stay here out of loyalty to you for giving my dad a job in 2005. I get it, and the little boy in me really appreciates what you did for my dad, but I'm not him. He's not here anymore. I've got to be me.
Wait, I'm sorry, Triple H, back up. Triple H said, I'm shocked that you want to leave due to everything I've done for your family?
According to Cody, yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, that's kind of the reaction I had when I read that, too, for the first time. Cody continues. I think Hunter, he's been in wrestling long enough that he knew, okay, this is a real one. He's not asking for more money. He's not asking for a title shot. Nothing would matter at this point. I let the burn get too bad before I say anything, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, he told another story, is a quote in there somewhere, about how his rock bottom moment came when he met a young fan who Charlotte had brought along and said, hey, you want to meet, because Stardust is this kid's favorite. And he said, yeah, I'll meet this kid. So this kid comes up to Cody. Cody didn't have any makeup on. Kid was like, you're Stardust? And he was like, yeah. He was like, before Stardust, I was Cody Rhodes, Intercontinental Champion. And the kid was like, I don't know who that is. And so Cody was like, I am merely Stardust. This is all that I am now.
This is all that I am. Here's another one. It's on WrestleDelphia Radio. He's talking about how Dusty encouraged him to leave after WrestleMania 28. He says, at 28, hold on a second.
Yeah, I think I know this one, yeah.
So at 28, I recalled particularly he was unhappy with the direction things were going with me and Big Show. He just thought that I was so close to the keys of the kingdom and they were slipping away that maybe leaving would wake them to the idea that this is somebody who wanted to captain your ship, and the way you guys are treating him has pushed him out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Continues, but it seemed at the time like kind of leopard's play, so it didn't interest me. I wanted to stick it out. I always tried to not take Pop's advice because he's my dad, so the advice always came from that part of his heart, not the businessman part of his heart, but his heart. And actually, at the end of my WWE career, he was right. I should have made that decision maybe a little sooner. So I think it was ultimately he left after Mania 32.
You know, dude, I honestly think that it worked out. One of the reasons why I think it worked out so well for him was because we all got to see what rock bottom was. As much as Cody put into Stardust, as entertaining as that was, it was dog shit. We all knew that he knew it was dog shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a fall from grace from where he had been before that now it made his departure and his triumphant return so much more relatable, because it's like, yeah, they gave him absolute dirt and he came back from that. Mm-hmm. And so you got to figure that, that Stardust thing, especially, the fact of the matter is, when I made the joke about him being dramatic, revolutionary is another way to put it, because everybody else copied it afterwards. The list of things you want to do, taking advantage, making the most out of social media to build up your own brand and take your career into your own hands. Just absolutely amazing what he was able to do and parlay that into. So
absolutely.
After everything I'm shocked after everything I've done for your family, the fuck.
I'd be like, get out of here, Triple H.
Look at me, buddy. Look at me. What have you really done for me?
I know. Is this what you've done for me?
Look at me now, idiot.
We're going to talk about someone else who, prior to Cody leaving, went out, reinvented themselves. Drew McIntyre. We're going to talk about him later on. And there was that spell, with Drew and Cody kind of being at the fore of that, where people would leave WWE. We saw it fairly recently with Matt Cardona. People would get released from WWE. They go out on the independents and reinvent themselves. And in the case of Drew and Cody, it ultimately led them back to WWE. I'm kind of surprised to a certain extent that it hasn't led Matt Cardona back to WWE. He really wants that to happen. I think it'd be interesting to take what he has done on the independents and kind of use that character and gimmick and see how that would work in WWE.
What would be awesome if he brought that gimmick to NXT? Because there you really have the crossroads, so to speak, of, given that they're trying to sign more independent talent, and then you've also got the homegrown stuff. That he should alter his gimmick a little bit to include elements of Bully Ray.
God, that's your answer for everything.
The boomer mentality just absolutely cracks me up. I didn't want to shake your hand because I didn't want to get too close. It's a handshake, dude. Nobody's asking you to date them. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next super chat. To the super chat that I missed.
Oh, you finally found it.
From Andrew Clough. $10 super chat says, AEW's been great for the last 5 weeks. I think they've found something with Harley, Bill Hobbs, Hangman MJF. Hope it continues. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. We wanted to make sure we got that in because $10 is a lot of money these days. And that's really, really nice of you to donate that to the cause. Andrew Clough. Thank you very much. Hopefully I pronounced that name correctly. It's Clough. I think that's Clough. All right, let's go ahead and move on now to number 9. Keith Lee.
When he got called up in 2020, of course, he was NXT champ and North American champ right before his call-up. Got right to a program with Randall Keith Orton. Beat him
at pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I had kind of forgotten a little bit of the timeline here, and you have to ask yourself in terms of the timeline, came up, did the thing with Randy Orton, won there at pay-per-view, and he was in line for a U.S. title shot against Bobby Lashley. And then I believe either he got injured or there was the health issue.
So I've seen both.
Okay.
Obviously, the health issue is what kept him out for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, so that kept him out. He came back, and is that when they saddled him with the Bearcat stuff?
So he came back on July 19th of 2022, entered open challenge against Lashley, lost, and then following that, was the Bearcat.
Okay, but before, yeah. So before that, though, like he made it all the way. When he got called up, they were even putting him in the title picture to a degree. He ended up fighting Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship, lost there, and then he was set to. Here it is. He was set to face off against Riddle and Bobby Lashley for the U.S. Championship at Elimination Chamber, but was pulled to that event due to an injury. He was absent for 5 months after that due to a COVID-19 diagnosis followed by the heart inflammation. And then he came back, and that's when they saddled him with the Bearcat stuff. And he seemed deflated in it. I mean, clearly, I think in retrospect, he's even said that the Bearcat stuff was not his idea. It was nothing he wanted to do. I always thought it was like, oh, that's kind of a cool homage to a wrestler that I think a lot of people don't know about, but would be interesting. It would be nice for people to be more educated on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But there's always a caveat, dude. If Keith Lee is into the idea, then that's cool.
That's the thing. You know, if it was
not
his idea, if he was into the idea, that's something else. If it's something that Vince says, you know, he calls up Keith Lee, sees him at a meeting. Hey, Bearcat. You know, it's like the Undertaker story where he calls up Mark Calloway.
Yeah,
and says, am I talking to the Undertaker? And you're all, am I the Undertaker now?
What if Vince called you back then and threw the gimmick at you, Larson? What would he say? What would be the gimmick? Am I talking to?
Oh, wow.
What gimmick would he throw at you that you'd be like, what the hell is this? Because there's some gimmicks out there that, like, you know, you'd probably be really cool with. You know, it's either like, hey, is this, if he called up me and he was like, hey, is this the, I don't know, what's something really cool? Hey, are you Jackknife Steve? Yeah, man, this is Jackknife Steve.
And he's like, hello, am I talking to the Trekkie?
I'd be hella about that. If he called you and was like, hey,
am I talking to the Sneakerhead?
Right, you'd be like, cool. You know, conversely, am I talking to Bum Larson? Wait, what? No,
What?
No.
I only look disheveled.
Anyways, you gotta wonder though if this is a situation where, on one hand, if by that time Triple H was in charge full on, make sure he's cleared, ready to go, good to go.
Yeah.
Restart fresh and strong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In Vince's case, he would do that thing where you never know, but this situation could be true. Oh, he was sick with COVID. Soured on him, right? Brings him back. I'm giving him a Bearcat gimmick because that's what I want him to be. Oh, he doesn't like it? You know? Let's get rid of him.
That could
just
be.
that weird Vince shit where he doesn't see that this guy is money, and instead it's like, well, I can make money with anybody, but you got to be willing. You know, I don't care if I stick you on a tour bus for 6 months and you hate it and you're miserable. There's no gyms around.
You shown the slightest inkling that you don't like it. Guess what?
Oh,
all the plans I have laid out for you.
Torpedoed.
It's ridiculous. So Keith was ultimately released November 2021. And then the following year was in AEW.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like they've used him, you know,
not terribly well either. But he's had injury issues. He's been out with injury for a while. So
yeah.
But yeah, it was darn surprising to see him to be one of. There's a lot of wrestlers that were unfortunately released in 2021. There's at least 3 wrestlers that were released during the course of that year, and they were all pretty surprised. Or the 3 listed here are all really surprising names. Obviously, there was a lot of surprising names that got released by WWE in 2021.
Yeah,
and seeing the success that Keith Lee achieved in NXT. Seemingly the success he was poised for in the main roster. You know, he had that Rumble spot with Lesnar, the Survivor Series spot with Roman.
Mm-hmm.
That was that was in 2019, the Survivor Series there. Getting put right into a program with Randy Orton after getting called up.
Beating him, yeah.
Yeah, beating him on pay-per-view. It seemed like he was in line for huge things. And, you know, health issues happen, but then to get seemingly your entire WWE career derailed because of a health issue, and then Vince just seemingly saying, all right, it's one of Vince's whims. All right, I just don't see it,
Do you remember when people were so on edge because whenever somebody get called up, it was like, oh, what are they going to do with them?
Oh,
and
I know.
In the case of Keith Lee, was they put like a shirt on him.
Yeah. Yep. They changed his theme song and they put a shirt on him. Yeah.
Yeah, they did change his theme song, didn't they?
They did change his theme song. Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Anyways, before we continue on with the rest of the show, let's talk about the sponsors for today's episode.
Let's do it. Let's take a break here to get a word from our sponsor, Hims. Hey, guys, look. I know it can be tough to deal with hair loss. If you look up here, you can see it's pretty thin on my head. But I'm here to tell you that just because you may have lost your hair, that doesn't mean you can't find it again. Hims makes treating hair loss simple with doctor-trusted options and clinically proven ingredients that can regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months.
That's correct, Larson. Everything is 100% online as well, so you can get access to a wide range of hair loss treatments, all from the comfort of your couch. All you got to do is answer a few questions, and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you, and if prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door for free. On top of all that, no insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care.
So start your free online visit at hims.com/goinginraw. That's hims.com/goinginraw for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/goinginraw.
Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
And let's get a word from our sponsor, Tempo, Steve.
Yeah.
I dare say we know quite a bit about fast food, yeah?
I've been around for a long time, eating a lot of fast food.
You got that right. And when you think fast food, you probably think of, unhealthy, thawed-out meat patties. It's covered in grease. Just a lot of grease. But sometimes fast food, it seems like the only option for mealtime when time is tight and you're in a hurry.
Yeah, man. Now that sounds familiar, which is why I ended up checking out Tempo. Tempo offers protein-packed fuel that saves you time without compromising your health goals. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that provides you with chef-crafted single-serving meals that are crafted to cook in just under 3 minutes, and they're delivered fresh right to your door.
Tempo's meals take the guesswork out of eating well, and with new recipes each week that are made with real, nutrient-rich ingredients, they make it easy to keep up with your healthy lifestyle. And for a limited time, Tempo is offering Going in Raw listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/raw.
That's tempomeals.com/raw for 60% off your first box. Tempomeals.com/raw. Rules and restrictions may apply. All right, man, let's go ahead and dive into the next one. Number 8. Mr. Kennedy. Wait. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Kennedy's time on top of the main event scene at WWE, shall we say, is tumultuous.
Yeah.
Won Money in the Bank, says, I'm cashing this in at WrestleMania. Great idea.
Yeah.
And then they said he tore his tricep, if memory serves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct.
Had him drop the briefcase to Edge, only to find out that the injury to his triceps was not that severe.
It
was a hematoma, I believe.
It was a hematoma. He was out month at most, is what he said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, his run seems a bit on the Kafka-esque side, Larson. Because it's like, this guy look, I was never a big Mr. Kennedy fan. That being said, he had the ingredients. I think definitely, yeah. I think definitely I'll put it this way. Vince felt he had the ingredients. He had, I guess he was WWE sized. He was
at an angle where he was going to be Vince's son.
He was. Yeah. And a lot of people did like him.
Yeah.
And so it's really crazy to see just how downhill everything went from John Cena and Randy Orton, seemingly, ratting him out as being dangerous to work with. He said him and Randy Orton, I watched a couple of shoot interviews. He said him and Randy Orton had been close at one point. And they had traveled together. And there was one quote from him where he said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, where he said something along the lines of, it was that 10-man match that everybody talks about with Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Where he says, Orton told me to give him a belly to back.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then Orton really oversells very dramatically after it. And he had said, you dropped me on my head. Well, you go back and you look at the tape, and he doesn't even, like, his neck does not touch Matt. Now, maybe, because I was speculating on this one, the angle does seem a little high when he drops him, and maybe Orton meant you would have dropped me if I didn't make it.
Not made it.
Yeah, make a pretty drastic, change midair or whatever. I don't know. But, and he said something, I'll never forget this because I read this moments ago. He said he was chewing me out on the way down to the dressing room, very quietly and calmly chewing me out. And I'm like, that's not, chewing somebody out is usually not quiet, nor is it calm.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was explaining to him. And then he claims that John Cena also, ran to Vince and said, this guy's unsafe. But then he also, in the shoot interview I saw, also took some responsibility. He says, that might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. He says, but also he had, I guess, said some things about Chris Benoit, and I couldn't find those comments, but he had mentioned some stuff about Chris Benoit that he says, I probably should have kept my opinion to myself. I think he said something along the lines of he didn't believe that it was simply the steroids, that there was a lot of actual personal stuff going on in his life that caused him to do what he did, wasn't blaming it on the CTE or the steroids, I guess. But, regardless of what his opinion was, he was like, I should have just kept that to myself. And there was other things along the way that, but the big thing was that Money in the Bank thing was like a game changer.
Yeah, it really was.
Because like Stephanie was the one that called him and said, hey, you got a torn triceps. You're going to be out 7-8 months. And it's like, all right, so this thing that I just won that I can have for a year, you want to put on edge. And then, so that happens. And then he goes and gets the second opinion or goes to the doctor. And he's like, this is just a hematoma.
Yeah.
Be out for maybe a month.
Yeah.
So it's like, he couldn't have gotten that info before doing the edge briefcase.
I know.
That's crazy.
So before he got released, so it was November of 2008, I think. Hold on, let me get my dates right here. So he is injured during a house show match. August of 2008. Dislocated his shoulder. He was out for 3 months. Then in early 2009 draft, supplemental draft, he was drafted to Raw. They started airing video packages about his return. There's the 10-man tag match. And then that was on the May 11th episode of Raw. And then on May 29th, May 11th when the video packages aired. So anyways, 4 days after his return match, the 10-man match is when he was released.
So he had his return. 4 days. I'm sorry. Was the 10-man match his return match?
Yeah.
Damn. He came back and they were like, oh, we don't want to work with this guy. Dang. That's messed up. Yeah.
So he got a feel for quite a while.
What's that?
He was out for quite a while from dislocating his
Eesh.
shoulder in August of 2028 and to have his return match in May of 2009.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said 2028, 2008.
2028, wow. Mr.
And then
Anderson.
have his return match of 2009.
Okay. Yeah, that's a crazy one. There's definitely an alternate history where Mr. Kennedy like main evented WrestleMania. It was like a perpetual WrestleMania main event guy. Who knows? There's maybe an alternate universe where we're huge Mr. Kennedy fans.
Could be.
Because of all the great stuff he did at WrestleMania. Anyways, well, it's not this one. Let's move on now to
where he's not doing this, Steve.
What a sad reality that would be if we never got the August 1 warning.
I know. Identity
revealed. All right, man, let's move on to number 7.
7.
Daniel Bryan.
So this is in 2010, of course, from the debut of the Nexus, where Daniel Bryan got so wrapped up in the moment he decided to choke out Justin Roberts with his own tie. And Justin Roberts is there on the ground, bleh, getting choked out.
Oh, there's no sounds coming from that voice.
Well,
there's no sound coming from that mouth, man. There's no noise when you're getting choked like that. Oh, that looked horrible.
It did look horrible. And so they released him.
Mm-hmm.
And then according to Danielson, apparently after the release, he was brought back relatively quickly. They apologized to him for the release, saying that they had to because of sponsors.
Well, also Linda McMahon, scumbag, was running for Senate.
Oh,
and I guess one of her donors, I found this on the internet. It sounds right, but I don't have any corroboration.
Yeah.
According to internet, one of her donors saw, and there's like trying to get away. You know, that's back when they were no blood, no chair shots, obviously. They're trying to get away from like strict violence. And then you see some dude getting legit choked out on air. And then she, I guess, made the call there or something like that. The interesting thing about Daniel Bryan, and then they brought him back 2 months later. In that period,
June and then back in August,
for SummerSlam against the Nexus. In that time, he showed up for like Shikara, a couple different places, not Ring of Honor because he had like a big ballyhoo goodbye there. But it always tripped me out that like, so this dude, he started training like, I don't know, was it like 98? Oh, here we go. 1999, he started training at Shawn Michaels School. Made his debut wrestling in December of 99, or I'm sorry, October of 99. And then by 2000, WWF had signed him to an 18-month contract.
Yeah.
And he just made sporadic appearances here and there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and then in 2002, he ended up going Ring of Honor, of course. But, so yeah, his history with WWF goes back to basically when he started wrestling, which
virtually.
is crazy.
Yeah.
I guess not so much for him because he's so good at it. But yeah, then 10 years later, does the NXT thing, gets released because of choking out Justin Roberts, comes back 2 months later, and, you know, the rest is kind of history, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I remember at the time, and like I remembered him from like the very few Ring of Honor matches I had seen. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I get it. This guy seems like head and tails more comfortable than anybody else in that NXT rookie class.
Yeah.
It's like he probably shouldn't even be here.
No, I know.
Oh, man.
It's like he should just be immediately signed to a contract on TV on a regular basis.
And then I swear, dude, I remember at the time, I don't know when we were doing the old podcast, the Trio O stuff, but I don't know how much we talked about it back then. But I remember there being the idea that 2 month like release was actually like a work or something, and they just took him off TV in order to come back with the Nexus. But clearly that wasn't the case. So
yeah,
I don't know. I'm just trying to pad out the entry because, you know, it's Daniel Bryan.
You know, I guess from the level of violence shown on screen, it's kind of shocking.
Well, yeah, it was pretty shocking.
It was pretty shocking.
Has
Justin Roberts ever talked about that?
I don't know if he's like had a shoot interview or whatever, but they work with each other in AEW.
I'm sure
there's been references. There's been references there.
Oh yeah.
I think they've joked about it on air, but I don't know if he's ever talked about like, oh my God, this was unexpected. Clearly it was.
Oh, here we go. I got it right here. Justin
what did
Roberts,
he say about it?
This is from. Oh, he wrote a whole thing from Sports Illustrated.
Oh, there you go.
Maybe it's an excerpt from his book.
He has a book?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Best seat in the house. Your backstage path through my WWE journey. Justin Roberts.
Look at that.
So this is what he had to say. He says, as I laid on the ground with my suit pants and just a pink tie, Daniel Bryan did what he thought he was supposed to do, make an impact. He saw an opportunity to get one last shot in on the last victim. He sat behind me, pulled on my tie, and strangled me. To this day, I still get messages about that night.
Yeah, man.
I've seen pictures, cartoons, memes that made fun of the tie violence. I have even seen a double action figure set of Daniel and me made by a fan that looked so real, it almost convinced me that I had an action figure. The choking was real. For anyone who commented about the face I made or the noise, oh wow, I just did that, or the noise I made or anything else that people claim to know, that tie was tied around my neck and it was 100% legit.
Oh,
that's horrifying.
That is horrifying. That's like one of the worst ways to go if you're going to go.
Yeah.
That'd be awful.
These guys, later known as the Nexus, made their mark and left. The show went off the air, and with the war zone and its destruction of materials, people strewn about, I was walked to the back by refs. And when I came through the curtain, I was dancing around like Jackass's party boy with my tie, no shirt combo.
That's funny.
So, let's see.
Real case for a clip-on tie, isn't it?
The Nexus came to the door and shook my hand, apologized as we all exchanged thank yous. Instead, I told them that was great. I thought it went well. The bosses seemed to be happy. It made for awesome TV. Everybody was fine, so it was perfect. Well, that didn't last long. As the week went on, our portion was removed from the highlight package. So seemingly, at least at the time, no hard feelings.
I mean, that's his point of view. I wonder if the reality was they came to his door, were like, "Oh, sorry about that," and he was like, "Fuck off."
Okay, he talks about after he found out Daniel got fired. He said, immediately got Bryan's number and gave him a call. I asked him what was going on. He explained that Vince had called to tell him that he had to let him go, something about choking not being allowed, and it was out of his hands. This is a typical example of a rule being broken without anybody knowing that it even existed. It wasn't like guys haven't choked each other before, but for some reason this choking incident got Bryan terminated. Bryan was a very talented guy, and I knew he'd be okay. Time just needed to pass, and this incident would be forgotten.
Well, there you go.
So he says, I heard from fans that I had, quote, told on Bryan for choking me, but I had gotten him fired because he choked me, and all sorts of crazy assumptions. So, I mean, everything seems to be cool between them.
All right.
He says this, it wasn't a fun period because I genuinely felt bad for Bryan, but there was nothing I could say to convince the masses Daniel was allowed to work independent shows, and he loved doing so.
Okay. All right.
There we go.
Well, there you go. On the record from Justin Roberts. Let's move on now to number 6.
6.
Braun Strowman. Braun. You know what's crazy?
Another one.
He had a killer match right before he got released.
I know.
With it was like Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, something like that.
Yeah.
God damn, that was such a good match.
It was a fun match.
He was being, I mean, you know, he was in the title scene for like the longest time. He had won the Universal title, had a feud with Bray Wyatt. And then just sort of out of nowhere, like you had mentioned earlier, in 2021, there were just some bizarre high-profile releases.
Yeah.
And he was one of them.
You know, I think the reporting at the time said that the reason given to talent, at least some of them were budgetary cuts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and who knows how accurate that is versus, you know, whatever whims that Vince may have had.
Yeah. You know, I wonder if it's a little bit of A and a little bit of B, because it was like during the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you look at, especially back then with the WWE trying to save every penny they could, trying to nickel and dime anything they could. They had those huge contracts they were giving out back in 2019 to try to compete with AEW. And then all of a sudden you got pandemic, a lot of uncertainty. And you've got, you know, Braun Strowman, who's probably making a shit ton of money because them big dudes made a lot of money.
Well, by that point, he was a former champion, too.
Yeah, right, yeah. And so it might have been a little bit of like, is the Bray one, we'll talk about in a little bit here, is truly baffling.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if Braun was ever like, you know, selling a ton of merch. But, you know, maybe it was a situation where it was like, well, we know that Braun... Even creatively, it was kind of obvious that they had gone as far as they knew how to go with Braun Strowman. And maybe that was part of it as well. It's like, well, I don't know what else to do with this guy. We're paying him a shit ton of money, and I don't know what else really we can do. So we might as well go ahead and do that. I could see that being the case, as opposed to like, you know, Braun sneezing near Vince weirdly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's still crazy because he was in a high-profile role right before he was released.
So that was on June 2nd, 2021. The list of names released on that day, including Braun, was Aleister Black.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Lana.
Yeah.
Buddy Murphy.
Okay.
Ruby Riott and Santana Garrett.
Santana Garrett was actually signed with the company. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think
boy, that's crazy. Whatever happened to her?
I don't know. I don't know. Because I think it was April of, was it 2021 or 2020? There was a bunch of releases too.
Yeah, they had done that with a lot of people that really weren't being heavily used all that much. If I recall correctly, the 2021, those sucked big time because it was COVID had just hit.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, let's, you know, get rid of as many sort of utility players as we can. And it's like, damn, man, those people have like, you know, lives and stuff, and it's the middle of a pandemic. And
that was a huge one because that's when they released Kurt Angle, Rusev, Drake Maverick, Zack Ryder, Kurt Hawkins, Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, Heath Slater, Eric Young, Rowan, Sarah Logan, No Way Jose, Mike Chioda, Mike Kanellis, Maria Kanellis, EC3, Aiden English, Leo Rush, Primo, Epico. That was on April 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. No, the pandemic, they released a ton of people back then.
Okay, so April 15th, 2021 was Samoa Joe, Billy Kay, Mickie James.
Okay.
The Iconics, Chelsea Green, Tucker Kalisto, Mojo Rawley, Bo Dallas, and Wesley Blake were all released on April 15th, 2021.
Thin roster. Like, they whittled that thing down to nothing. So you had like the same people featured on every single episode.
Yep.
Yeah. Rematch after rematch after rematch.
Yep.
Anyways, let's move on to number 5. Drew McIntyre.
So, of course, he was, shortly after, around the time of his debut, was anointed the Chosen One by Vince McMahon himself.
Bad move.
Yeah, they set very high expectations. And it set the bar really high, so if Drew didn't meet it, he'd be seen as a disappointment.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know,
if he didn't meet it in Vince's eyes.
Yeah, exactly. And Drew's talked a lot about his release. I have this quote here from, what is this from? An appearance on Pat McAfee's show. He said, "I was fired in 2014 by WWE, and I deserved to get fired. I needed to get fired to truly find myself." And 10 years later, The Rock's announcing that Drew McIntyre signed with WWE. For anyone out there who's made it and then you get knocked out on your butt, you got to keep fighting. You got to keep pushing forward. You got to leave no stone unturned, put the work in, be accountable to the person in the mirror. You can do freaking anything. I've done it time and time again. This is the most recent incident of it. I got another quote here, too. I mean, he was tag champ, intercontinental champ, and then seemingly Vince really soured on him. And by the time he was released, he was in three-man band.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny, though, because Drew McIntyre really is... Here, this is the funny thing about that, is when you go back and you look at his first run, I'll say this for myself. You don't see what you see today.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you see, you know, fresh-faced, baby-faced guy, tall, but also, like, muscularly lean, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, he wasn't like he is today. Mm-mm. And certainly that level of hunger and confidence isn't there. And it's entirely possible that Vince, given his experience, did see that what we have now was possible out of what they had back then. But in Drew's case, that didn't happen quick enough. And then he got released, and it was like almost overnight, seemingly. You know, he grew that amazing beard, and he very quickly packed on a bunch of muscle and carved his own path in a very, well, I guess that was before Cody, wasn't it? Because that was 2014.
Yeah, it was 2014 when he was released, yeah.
That's right. And so he went out and, you know, like Cody had said in their little feud or whatever, he says, or Drew had said to Cody, you know, they call it a Cody or they call it a Drew, because those are the two blueprints for how to leave and come back. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you got to wonder if Vince just realized, well, he's not getting to where I thought he could be fast enough. And so he got released. And honestly, like, dude, you know, when you look at somebody, I'll throw this name out there because this is a name that I've always felt could have benefited from it. And that's Nick Nemeth. And I think it's too late now, but you know, he went from being the Spirit Squad guy to being, you know, Dolph Ziggler. And by the time he was on, because what did he have? He had 2 short-lived title reigns, right?
Yeah. Well, one, it was handed to him, and then he lost it right away.
Okay.
And the other one is when he cashed in against Alberto Del Rio and then got concussed.
Huge.
Yeah.
Then he got concussed.
Dropped it and then never had it again. Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I would say a year after that or so, after the cash in. Well, dude, even in 2016, he was doing some good stuff.
Like the retirement angle against The Miz. He was the sole survivor in that 1 year Survivor Series match where Sting was involved. So,
and I wonder if around then, if he would have got out and went to New Japan.
Had the reinvention. Yeah.
Very quickly, he got stale.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, oh, okay, oh boy, this is not, you know, he just sort of was there and he wasn't really changing his character or doing anything interesting. Another name that you could consider, although look, anybody would be so happy to have a career of The Miz, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder if the guy had gone away and come back, reinvented, But not everybody has the creativity to reinvent themselves.
I know.
You know, not everybody can add 50 pounds of muscle like Drew McIntyre did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. Gee whiz, my phone is just being too much today.
My goodness, you're a popular man, Steve, here.
I guess so. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Sure.
Number 4.
4.
Jeff Hardy. This one back in 2003 because there was like 3 of these things.
Yeah. So it was, July of 2002 where he had that match against The Undertaker for the title.
Ladder match, yeah.
Yeah, it really put him on the map as a single star to pay attention to. And that was a direction his career was headed. It's like the Hardy Boys would eventually split apart. He was in contention for the European titles, the Intercontinental title. Won the Hardcore title. I think he even won the European title during that stretch, too.
Yeah.
He did. And so he was, launching his singles career. And then in April of 2003, he was released.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
The company cited erratic behavior, substance abuse, a refusal to go to rehab, tardiness, no showing events.
Mm-hmm.
Hardy says he was burnt out. And it's interesting that when they brought back the Hardys, they issued this extensive press release talking in pretty significant detail about what led to them leaving to begin with.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
With quotes from Jeff. He said this. This is in 2007, I believe, when they came back. Says, I didn't need rehab. When I was released from WWE, it just wasn't about demons or demonic metaphors that related to drug use. I failed numerous drug tests because I just didn't care. Didn't care to wrestle anymore. A sense of me believes that it might have just been a way out of wrestling. That's in the past, and that's forgotten about. I'm in a positive place now, and that's what motivates me. But this is, it kind of details Matt and Jeff's journey to WWE to begin with.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And, and then them coming back.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it's interesting. It's not usual that especially these days, that you have such a extensive press release like this.
Yeah, that's abnormal. Yeah. It's funny though, because like the Hardys are so iconic, and you have to wonder, had that not come into play. And sometimes you got to ask yourself, and I hate saying this, but there are some artists who simply wouldn't be who they are if it wasn't for those kind of demons. And it's a horrible thing, but it's just the truth. And you take the people for who they are fully. And unfortunately, that was the thing that got kind of in the way, I think, of Jeff Hardy achieving, if it was possible for him to achieve the John Cena status or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think he's any less iconic because of it. But yeah, he definitely had those runs with WWE where, they all sort of ended up in the same manner. I was like, geez, why did it have to be that way?
So this is the second paragraph of this press release. It says, as reported on WWE.com, former superstar Jeff Hardy has been rehired by WWE more than 3 years after his release from the company, showing up late for a slew of WWE events. And with his in-ring performance slipping, Jeff's sudden descent 3 years ago was reportedly a result of a poisonous drug addiction. After refusing to go into drug rehabilitation, Hardy was released from WWE in May of 2003.
That was in his welcome back press release.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think that's about?
I don't know. Because it says down here, too, says he doesn't want to be referred as the one who overcame his demons. He says, I'd like to drop that. Or rather be he's back and he's full throttle. So it's like he just wanted to focus on his return and, hooray, Jeff Hardy's back. But the company's focus seemingly was, this is why we released him to begin with.
I don't know. It's such a weird company. It's such a weird company. Like, why put that in like, maybe I get it. Maybe it's like, hey, people, don't get your hopes up. like, is that the point of the press release? Like, yeah, he burned us before. It might burn you again. But we're bringing him back this time.
So I'm trying to see if, so it was in 2006 they came back, not 2007, August 2006. I was trying to see if they were working any of that into the stories they were telling with him,
Man,
I wasn't watching at the time, so I don't remember.
They visited that stuff so often. I mean,
know.
famously in 2009 with CM Punk.
And later also with Samoa Joe.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Yeah, much later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if they did, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe did they have a documentary coming out at the time? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's a fucking weird company, bro. Let's move on now to number 3.
3.
Bray Wyatt. Now, this one was evidently, this was largely due to the relationship between Vince McMahon and Bray Wyatt.
Yeah.
That Vince would, when they would not be able to see eye to eye creatively, Vince would resort to making snide comments about Bray Wyatt's weight. And he never really went full throttle on making something out of Bray Wyatt that would be comparable to The Undertaker, which I think a lot of people understandably saw his character and was like, oh, wow, this guy can be that. He can be that. And so, but the presentation of Bray Wyatt was such that he was a tremendous merchandise seller.
Oh, yeah.
And so a guy who obviously was probably paid pretty darn well seemed to be able to more than justify the big paycheck through his merch sales, his popularity. He was a draw. No matter how many times they did something with him, people are always wanting to see more of Bray Wyatt, even if they would drop the ball with him. Every single time it was like, oh man, another storyline that they could have done something really cool with and they didn't, but let's see what they can come up with next. And every single time it sort of played out the same way. And eventually, I don't know, I guess it just got to be too much for Vince or whatever, or the relationship between the two of them. And he was released. And that was a shocker. I remember that being really shocking.
Yeah.
Back
it was
in 2021.
Shocking despite the many drop balls with Bray creatively, he's still the motivation potentially for interesting stories.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Given the nature of his character and whatever the issues existed with Vince, and if to the extent to which their relationship soured, you think on a professional level, all right, let's try to work through that stuff, because from a creative standpoint, he's a wildly creative dude, comes with interesting ideas, and we could tell some interesting stories with him.
Mm-hmm.
But again, in 2021, it's seemingly the situation where Vince was just, if there was any sort of issue with him and a talent, whether it be what they're making, creative issues, whatever the case may be, he was letting them go.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And it was damn shocking when Bray was released. Did not see that coming, because he seemed like he was one of the cornerstones of the company.
It did, yeah, and it had been because him and Orton had a match at WrestleMania 37 that year,
mm-hmm.
and I think the next night on Raw or that following Monday, Alexa Bliss, who had that really cool the cool Jack in the Box thing with the black goo coming down off her face and everything, said that she didn't need him anymore, and then and he just wasn't around. He just didn't show up again. And then it was 3 months later that they released him. And so that was crazy. And then it was a year and change later, it was in September of the following year, that the QR code White Rabbit Jefferson Airplane stuff started.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was going crazy over that stuff. It was really awesome. And then he was brought back for a feud with LA Knight. And then, obviously he passed away not too long after that. It was in 2023. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, Vince he got so close so often in really cracking that character. And he had the Universal title several times. He had the WWE title and the Universal title, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, the guy was always ready for that main event slot, and he had the main event slot here and there, but Vince just couldn't figure out, as Triple H said, at a certain point the bell rings and you got to translate that stuff into the wrestling stuff.
Yeah.
And if there was one guy who definitely would not be able to figure that out, it would be Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
It's just Too old school.
Yep.
Anyways, let's move on now to number 2. Bret Hitman Hart.
So, I mean, this might be in a lot of respects, the most famous contract release because so much of it played out in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
So the story is well told, but in brief, Bret had signed in 1996 a 20-year deal with WWF. And by the time late 1997 rolled around, Vince went up to him and was like, yeah, we can't afford to pay you this money anymore. So we'd be happy to release you from this contract so you can go sign a massive deal with WCW.
I think it was like a 20-year deal for like $1 million a year.
Yeah.
But WCW had like $3 million a year waiting for him.
Yes. So Vince released him from his deal. And then the only kind of questionable thing that needed to be answered before he goes to WCW was, how was he going to drop the title? Montreal Screwjob happened, of course, in the wrestling history. And, I guess in some respects, this release isn't necessarily comparable to some of the other ones listed here. But Bret was released from his contract.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that, if the idea, if Bret had stayed, if they had come to some agreement so Bret could have stayed through the Attitude Era, what that would have looked like.
I mean,
would he even have been into it?
Dude, it's so weird because, like, on one hand, it's one of those things where I think he was just bummed out by it all.
Yeah.
Because if you watch that documentary, the guy did sign a 20-year contract.
Yeah.
For, per year, a third of what he could have got the other place.
Yeah.
So he wanted to stay there. The problem was, it seemed kind of obvious also that he wasn't huge on the direction of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you can't have things both ways. You either want to be there. It's not going to be, nobody wants the program to stay the way it is in 1996. And so I don't know. I mean, he's a complex individual.
Yeah.
And he was also dicked around probably more than anybody in the history of WWF.
Yeah, he was, a lot.
But, I mean, dude, you got to figure, for one thing, would we have ever gotten Mr. McMahon? Who I know he's like persona non grata these days, but as a character was a centerpiece of the Attitude. It was like the centerpiece bad guy of the Attitude Era. Is kind of the glue that held the place together in terms of creativity. And, would we have gotten that without the Bret screwed Bret stuff? I know there were already hints of it.
Yeah.
Could that character had still emerged, but in a feud with Bret Hart? Where would that have left? I mean, could you imagine if like that Montreal Screwjob stuff played out, but as a work, as a storyline?
Yeah.
And where would that have left? What's the domino effect there? Where would that have left Stone Cold? Would Owen have passed? There are some that's a huge, huge question.
Yeah.
But I remember you and I did that wrestling What If, and thinking of that, if he never had a match at Goldberg, would he have had his own end of an era match, in 2008, 9, 10, whatever it was, would we have gotten one of those? So I don't know. A lot of great questions there. And it's pretty shocking how all that went down still after all this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, 20-year contract. Geez.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. Big deal.
Huge.
Let's move on now to number 1. Kurt Angle.
2006, August 25th, 2006 to be exact. Kurt was granted an early release from his deal. He's talked about extensively. He was working badly hurt. Wrestling 200 plus days a year, no time off. His body was breaking down. And he was like, I need time off. And so he asked for his early release and got it. He spoke about his release at Steel City Con. Said, I had a lot of issues going on, personal issues. I was getting injured quite a bit. The company was still working me the bone. I had no choice. So I left in 2006 and went to TNA. So it was a matter of a couple months after his release that he showed up in total nonstop action.
Yeah.
Confronting
WWE.
Samoa Joe.
Well, yeah, man. And Vince and I remember JR specifically was like, oh, man, why'd he do that? He told us he couldn't work. Well, there's a difference between working like once a month and working 80 days
Every day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so what? Fuck you, WWF.
Yes.
I understand that point of view. But the crazy thing is, so he was like, I think he said at the time he was the highest paid guy on the roster.
Yeah, he was at least one of the highest paid people. Yeah.
And if you remember, like, they had him kind of all over the place. Like, he was ECW champion for a while.
That's so weird.
It was weird. And so, at that point, it did seem not only were they working him to the bone, there wasn't like a lot of solid direction for him. And yeah, I mean, dude, how many of these, like, you got Kurt Angle, you got Jeff Hardy, you got Mr. Kennedy to a degree, but like those two names particularly, it's like they just work these guys to the bone. They just absolutely overwork them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't blame Kurt Angle for this one, man. And he had a great run in TNA too.
Oh, yeah.
He likes the run better than his WWF run.
He was in TNA longer than he was in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
So he walked into WrestleMania in 2006 as champ, lost to Rey Mysterio, and then in late May he was drafted to ECW. That's when he started doing the Wrestling Machine gimmick. Took on had an open challenge at One Night Stand 2006, where he beat Orton. Challenged RVD for the title, lost, and then was on TV here and there before getting released in August.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so it was kind of like, what are we doing with him right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. After him being, one of the top guys in the company pretty much since he made his debut.
So he walked into Mania that year as champion?
Yeah, World Heavyweight Champion, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then lost the title to Mysterio after Ray pinned Randy Orton in a triple threat match.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. Well, there you go.
So even in that match, he was protected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Anyways, that's going to do it for Count Out, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Later on today on SmackDown. No, on our SmackDown review, Larson and I are going to review SmackDown.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
Later
SmackDown.
on, we've got our SmackDown review today, so check that out with us. After the SmackDown show is completed, we will be live right here at youtube.com/Steven Larson, so come hang out with us. Till next time, we'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.